Welcome back to Han's story, where mysteries buried for many years will be revealed one by one. Today we begin a chilling and unforgettable journey, starting from a seemingly normal beach trip of a small family in 1990. But 20 years later, what people found under that deep layer of sand made everyone ask the question again: did they really disappear, or were they just waiting to be found? If you are a fan of mysterious, thrilling, and profound stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any part of this series. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden haze over the endless stretch of sand that was Shallow Bay. A place mostly forgotten, tucked far away from the polished resorts and loud vacation towns, it held an emptiness that was oddly inviting. No welcome signs, no lifeguards, no souvenir stands, just miles of untouched coastline, the whisper of waves, and a stillness that wrapped around the beach like a veil. The Harrow family had arrived that morning, driving for nearly 6 hours from their small house in Wayford. Michael Harrow was 32, a mechanical engineer with a fascination for old cameras and an odd fondness for solitude. His wife, Elise, had once been a school teacher before their daughter Lily was born 5 years earlier. Petite, with shoulder-length dark hair and a voice that could hush even the wildest classroom, Elise had insisted on a vacation by the sea. "Lily's never seen the ocean," she'd said. "She deserves to see the world beyond our backyard." So they came here, to Shallow Bay. They set up camp just beyond the grassy dunes, an olive-green canvas tent, a small cooler filled with food, 2 foldable chairs, and an old handheld VHS camcorder that Michael had brought more out of nostalgia than necessity. He filmed everything. Lily running barefoot in the sand, Elise picking shells with a calm smile, even the clouds rolling in from the east like soft gray waves in the sky. There was something simple and sacred about those hours. No cell phones, no schedules, just a family and the sea. By late afternoon, Lily had built a lopsided sandcastle complete with a moat, and Michael had captured it all on tape. As the tide began to creep higher, Elise called her daughter back. "Time to wash off and eat," she said, brushing sand from the little girl's knees. Michael recorded her voice too, and the way Lily pouted. But by the time the sun disappeared, something had shifted in the air. The wind picked up subtle at first, then more insistent, rattling the tent flaps and pushing the dry dune grass in nervous waves. Michael looked out toward the water. There was nothing visibly wrong. The sea was calm, the horizon unbroken. But he felt something a prickle beneath his skin, like eyes watching from the shadows just beyond sight. He tried to shake it off. Long drive, salty air, maybe just fatigue. Dinner was uneventful. Sandwiches, a bag of chips, lukewarm soda. Lily fell asleep in Elise's lap, her small fingers wrapped around a seashell she refused to let go of. Michael tucked her into a sleeping bag and stepped outside, switching the camcorder to night mode as he scanned the empty beach. The tape would later show a slow pan across the sand, the dunes swaying under moonlight, the silhouette of driftwood near the shoreline. But nothing unusual, nothing alarming. At least not then. Michael sat near the tent, letting the camera roll idly. The only sound was the distant crash of waves. He was about to turn it off when something flickered in the viewfinder, a movement. Quick, unnatural. He turned the camera sharply, pointing it toward the waterline. There was nothing there, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He stood slowly, lowering the camera. His breath caught. Far down the beach, just past the curve of the bay, he thought he saw a figure. Too far to make out barely more than a smudge against the sand, not moving, just standing there. He blinked. When he looked again, it was gone. He didn't tell Elise. The next morning, everything appeared normal. The sun returned, the sea sparkled, and Lily laughed as she chased gulls along the tide. Michael buried his unease. Probably just another camper walking by. Maybe even a trick of the light. Shallow Bay had a way of playing with perspective. That's what he told himself. But that night it happened again. He was inside the tent, watching old footage on the camera screen while Elise read beside him. The wind outside had stilled to a haunting silence. Then a sound, faint, deliberate, like sand shifting under someone's step. Michael paused the tape. Another sound, this time closer. He stepped out, camera in hand. Nothing but moonlit dunes and dark water. He turned on the night vision again and began to record. Slowly he walked toward the shoreline, the sand crunching under his feet. He stopped at the edge of the tide. And then something whispered. He turned sharply, behind him nothing. But the whisper came again. A child's voice, faint, giggling. He pointed the camera toward the dunes. The camcorder screen showed movement, a small figure half submerged in the sand as if crawling or sinking just before vanishing beneath the surface. He ran forward but found only smooth, undisturbed sand. Michael didn't sleep that night. On the morning of the third day, Elise found a line of footprints circling their tent. Small, bare footprints. Lily's size. But Lily had been asleep with them the whole night. Michael double-checked the zipper on the tent. It had never been opened. Elise was unsettled but tried to explain it away. Maybe someone else had come by. A child from a nearby camper. A prank. But they hadn't seen another person since arriving. Michael suggested they leave early. Elise hesitated. Just one more night, she said. It's probably nothing. So they stayed. That night Michael dug a hole near the base of the dunes. He didn't tell Elise why. Just said he wanted to bury the camera equipment for safety in case of rain. But in truth, he felt something coming. Something that wasn't going to let them leave so easily. He placed the camcorder, a few tapes, and Elise's journal into a small lockbox, one they had brought to store valuables, and sealed it shut. He buried it deep, nearly 3 feet, and packed the sand tight. The ocean seemed louder that night, even though the wind had died completely. Later he filmed one last video. He set the camcorder on a makeshift tripod facing their tent. He stood in front of it silent, the glow of the campfire flickering across his face. Behind him, Elise held Lily in her arms, looking tired, drained. Michael leaned toward the camera, his voice low. If someone finds this, we didn't leave. We didn't run. It wasn't an accident. He glanced over his shoulder, then back to the lens. I think the sand remembers things. I think it wants something. A pause. And it's already taken too much. The tape ended as the firelight dimmed, and a shadow, tall, thin, human-like, but not quite right, passed between the tent and the camera just for a split second. The next morning, a passing fishing boat reported seeing an empty tent near the edge of the dunes. No people. No signs of struggle. The tent was zipped up untouched. Food half-eaten. Shoes still placed neatly by the entrance. Only one odd thing stood out, 3 shallow indentations in the sand near the water, as if someone had kneeled, then disappeared into the earth. The authorities searched for days. Helicopters scanned the coast. Divers combed the bay. Bloodhounds sniffed the dunes. But there was nothing, not a trace. No bodies, no belongings. The Harrow family was declared missing. A cold case. Eventually, it faded into local lore. Another shallow bay mystery like the sailor in 72 or the vanishing backpackers of 84. But the box stayed buried. Waiting. 20 years later, Shallow Bay had changed, but only on the surface. A narrow road had been paved along the dunes. A single wooden sign now marked the entrance Coastal Preserve. No lifeguard on duty. Enter at your own risk. A local conservation group had installed a few small trash bins and a posted map that no one ever read. There were no public restrooms, no umbrellas, still no crowds. On most days it remained empty. But on July 18, 2010, a group of graduate students from Holbrook University arrived for a low-budget field study. Their professor had recently published a paper on shifting coastal sediment patterns, and Shallow Bay, with its oddly uniform tide lines and persistent dune stability, had become a case study in contradiction. The team consisted of 6 students, most of them sunburned within the first hour. They camped just beyond the tall grass near where the Harrow family had once pitched their tent, though none of them knew that. The beach kept its secrets well. By mid-morning on the second day, the group had split into two clusters. While one group charted wind data up the cliff path, the other, Sam Halley, and a quiet international student named Min, took turns mapping shallow trench lines near the south end of the bay. It was Halley who hit something solid. She'd been using a collapsible aluminum probe, sliding it into the sand every few feet, measuring depth and compaction. The moment it struck metal, the vibration traveled up the rod into her palm. She froze. Sam looked over from where he was kneeling in the shade. Hit rock. Halley shook her head. Metal. Something flat. Min came closer, brushing his fringe aside. How deep? Halley knelt, ran her fingers through the sand, then started to dig. It was only about a foot down, maybe less. The sand peeled back easily, too easily, like it had been disturbed before years ago, and then forgotten. Within minutes, her hands uncovered the edge of a dark rust-flecked metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox with a corroded latch and a faint, almost unnoticeable carving H. She turned to Sam. Should we open it? Sam hesitated. The box looked old. Really old. But it wasn't like they were on an archaeological dig. This wasn't marked federal land. He nodded. Careful, though. Halley popped the latch. It gave with a crunch of oxidized metal. Inside, the contents were dry, eerily dry, as if the box had been sealed only days ago, not decades. A handheld VHS camcorder sat on top, worn but intact. Beneath it were several plastic tape cartridges, an old leather-bound notebook, and a small red plastic toy, a shovel the kind children use to build sandcastles. Halley exhaled sharply. This stuff shouldn't be in this condition. Min picked up the camcorder. Still has a battery. No way. He pressed the power button. Nothing happened. Still something about the find made Halley uneasy. The notebook which she gently opened revealed neat cursive handwriting in faded blue ink. The first page simply read, Elise Harrow, July 1990. For Lily, if we ever leave this place. Sam leaned over her shoulder. Wait. Harrow. Why does that sound familiar? Min squinted at the tape labels inside the box. Each was labeled by date, all from July 1990. Guys, Halley said slowly, I think we just dug up someone's life. That night, they gathered around a borrowed portable VHS converter connected to Min's laptop. They chose the earliest tape, first dated July 13th, 1990. As the grainy footage loaded, the screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy but stable image, a family of 3, standing in front of a green tent. The father, tall with dark hair and sunburnt shoulders, held the camera at arm's length, smiling. A woman, petite and soft-spoken, leaned into him, and between them stood a little girl, maybe 5 years old, holding a red plastic shovel. None of the students spoke for several minutes. The sound of waves and laughter filled the room. Lily danced in circles on the sand. Then came the second tape, July 14th, 1990, night. Michael Harrow sat alone by a fire. His face was pale, drawn. In the background, the tent rustled slightly in the breeze. His voice was low. If you're watching this, it means you found the box. I buried it tonight. I don't know what else to do. I don't think we're supposed to leave. He turned the camera slowly toward the shoreline where the moonlight shimmered like glass. For a brief moment, a shape moved past, blurry, almost human, but twisted. The screen distorted. The image froze for a second before resuming. Sam leaned forward. Did you see that? I'm rewinding, Min muttered. He dragged the clip back frame by frame. There between two frames was something standing at the edge of the surf, long arms, no face. Its body stretched unnaturally, as if caught mid-step in a place it didn't belong. Then gone. They sat in silence for nearly 2 minutes. Halley finally whispered, What the hell did they film? The third tape was worse. July 15th, last entry. The camera lay on the sand, half buried, tilted upward. From the angle it had been placed there intentionally. The family tent stood in the background, unlit, unmoving. Then footsteps. Small, quick, child-sized. A giggle. Not loud but close. And then just before the tape ended, a whisper, female, breathless, "Don't let them find us." The screen turned to static. Min removed his headphones. That voice was right next to the mic, but nobody was on screen. Later that night, unable to sleep, Hallie did a quick online search for Harrow family Shallow Bay. The first hit was a Wayford Gazette article from 1990, "Family of 3 disappears without a trace." The photo was blurry scan from an old print, but it was them, Michael, Elise, Lily. She read every word. There had been no signs of struggle. Their tent was zipped shut, their belongings untouched. No footprints, only an open notebook left on a folding chair, and 3 impressions in the sand leading toward the water like someone had knelt and never stood up. Hallie looked around at her sleeping teammates. A chill crept over her shoulders. They were camped right on top of it. She didn't sleep at all. The next morning, things began to go wrong. Min found deep impressions near the base of the dune where the box had been. Too large for birds or rabbits. Long drag marks like something crawling or being pulled. Then Sam noticed the tents had shifted, just slightly, a few inches closer to the waterline. No one had moved them. By midday, the wind picked up out of nowhere despite clear skies and calm forecasts. Sand blew hard into their eyes. Equipment bags flipped over. The air felt charged heavy. At dusk, Hallie walked back alone to the box site. The sand there was different. It looked the same, but her feet sank deeper than before, like something beneath was softening. She knelt, pressing her hand flat. Warmth. Not from the sun. Something else, like a breath rising from below. She stood and backed away slowly. That night, Min began talking in his sleep. In Vietnamese at first, then in English. Clear words, slurred but unmistakable. "She's still here. Don't dig. It wasn't the water." He didn't remember it the next day. Sam tried to laugh it off. "We're psyching ourselves out. This is all in our heads." But when Hallie replayed the tape again, frame by frame, she found something new. In the very last scene, just as the screen distorted, someone had walked behind the tent. Someone wearing the exact same windbreaker Sam was wearing now. But the tape was from 1990, and Sam had never owned that jacket before this trip. The morning air at Shallow Bay had turned thick, oppressive. What was once just a lonely, wind-swept beach now felt claustrophobic even in the open. The sky wore a thin veil of haze, dulling the sunlight into a chalky smear. The students were up early, but no one spoke about the tape or the jacket or the whispering from the night before. It was all unspoken tension now heavy in the air, crawling between their words like static. Sam was the first to say it aloud. "I want to leave today." Hallie didn't respond right away. She sat on a weathered wooden cooler near the tents, staring at the VHS tape in her hand, like it was a loaded weapon. Min stood by the edge of the dunes, arms crossed, facing the sea. His eyes were blank, unfocused, as if listening for something beneath the crash of waves. "You saw the jacket, right?" Sam pressed. "It's me. It's my jacket, no question." On that tape from 1990, Hallie finally looked up. Her voice was quiet. "It doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't. Which is exactly why we should go." "We should document everything first," Min said, not turning around. "There's something here." Sam scoffed. "We dug up a missing family's belongings, a little girl's toy, a camera that somehow recorded someone wearing my jacket 20 years ago. That's not something. That's messed up." Hallie nodded slowly, almost absent-mindedly. "I think, whatever happened to the Harrow family, it's not over." Min knelt suddenly and touched the sand. "It's moving again," he whispered. They didn't understand what he meant until later that afternoon, when Hallie noticed the dunes had shifted. A full foot of elevation lost in some places, as if the sand had been drawn downward, like something was breathing beneath the surface, alive, restless. Min spent the better part of the day staring at tide tables and atmospheric readings, trying to rationalize it. Hallie found another tape tucked in the bottom lining of the metal box, one they had missed. July 15th, labeled "Don't watch until you know." She debated for hours before finally playing it just after sunset. She didn't tell the others. The tape began with static. Then Michael Harrow's voice, tired, raspy. Not afraid, just defeated. This is for Lily, he said, in case we don't make it out, and for whoever finds this. The camera shifted and Elise's face filled the frame. She was pale, lips chapped, but her voice remained steady. It isn't the beach, she said. It's the sand. It's not alive in the way we understand, but it remembers. It watches. When you dig, when you stay too long, it reaches for you. It copies. Her voice cracked. It already took Lily. The frame tilted blurred shapes, frantic movement, and then focused again on Michael standing at the edge of the surf, holding something in his arms. It looked like a child, wrapped in a towel, perfectly still. But something was wrong. The towel moved, jerked, spasmed, and then two small hands reached out. Not for help. For him. The camera dropped. The screen went black. Hallie sat in silence for what felt like an hour. Her fingers trembled as she hit pause. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark laptop screen. Something inside her had shifted. A part of her mind, logical, scientific, had begun to unravel. When she stepped outside the tent, Sam was already packing. I'm leaving tonight, he said flatly. With or without you two. Hallie didn't argue, but as he zipped up his backpack, she noticed something odd. A trail behind his tent. A deep rut like something had been dragged in the sand. She followed it, flashlight in hand, until it abruptly ended in a circle, a perfect indentation about the size of a person pressed into the earth. No footprints around it. No sign of what made it. She called out to Min, no answer. When she returned to the main tent, Min was standing at the camera tripod, staring into the darkness beyond the dunes. She's coming back, he murmured. Who? He turned slowly, face blank. Lily. That night, Sam left alone, hiking back up the trail toward the road. Hallie and Min remained behind, though she didn't know why. Some mixture of dread and obligation held her there. She couldn't leave the tapes, couldn't pretend they hadn't found something real. At 2:13 a.m., Hallie woke to a strange sound. Children laughing. She sat up, heart pounding. Outside, the beach glowed faintly under the moonlight. The laughter was faint but distinct, high-pitched, playful, almost musical. She unzipped the tent. Min was already outside, barefoot in the sand. Do you hear that? She asked. He nodded. Then without a word, he began walking toward the water. Wait. But he didn't turn around. She followed him halfway down the dunes before freezing. Standing in the surf, just at the water's edge, was a small girl. Long black hair, pale skin, wearing a sundress soaked and clinging to her knees. She didn't move. Min kept walking. Hallie called out again. Min! That's when the girl smiled. A slow, crooked stretch of the lips that didn't reach her eyes. And then she split. Not literally, but suddenly there were two of her. Then three. Each identical, each standing side by side in the surf. Silent. Smiling. Min stopped. Hallie screamed for him. But the tide rose suddenly, violently, waves crashing higher than physics should allow, and all three figures vanished. So did Min. She ran forward, searching the beach with trembling hands, calling his name again and again. But there was no sign of him, only a pair of barefoot prints, one set, leading into the water, and none returning. The next morning the others returned from the cliff hike, to find Hallie alone, covered in sand, shivering. She didn't say anything, just pointed to the surf. They found Sam's jacket floating there, torn, and something else, a second metal box, smaller, buried just beneath where Min had stood. Inside was a photograph, faded, water-stained, a picture of the Harrow family, but not quite. There were 4 people in the photo, Michael, Elise, Lily, and a 4th figure standing just behind them, partially in shadow, face blurry, almost familiar. It looked exactly like Min. The photo wouldn't stop trembling in Hallie's hand. Not because of the wind, it had died down since the night Min vanished, but because something inside her refused to accept what her eyes saw. She kept staring at the image Michael Harrow, with one arm around Elise. Little Lily smiling shyly up front, and behind them, almost out of frame, stood a figure who shouldn't exist. a man in a dark collared shirt partially obscured by shadows. The resolution was poor, but the shape of the jaw, the short black hair, the slope of the shoulders, it looked exactly like Min. Except the picture was from 1990, 20 years ago. Sam was gone. Min was gone. Of the original 6 grad students, only 3 remained. The remaining 2, Kayla and Liam, had returned from the cliffside transects, only to find Hallie kneeling in the sand, her cheeks streaked with tears and salt. She told them what had happened, or at least as much as she could say aloud without her voice breaking. That Min had walked into the surf, that he never came back, that there had been a little girl standing where no one should have stood. Liam hadn't believed her at first. He thought Min had gone into town. He suggested maybe she'd had a breakdown. "You haven't slept in 2 nights," he'd said. But when they pulled the second metal box from the wet sand and opened it when they saw the photo with their own eyes, the denial began to crumble. None of them had an explanation. There wasn't one. They debated leaving, just packing up everything and calling the university, or the police. But what could they say that one of their classmates had been lured into the ocean by a ghost child, that they'd found a man's image in a photograph taken before he was even born? Kayla finally spoke. "We don't leave," she said flatly. "Not yet." Liam looked at her like she was insane. Kayla turned the photo over in her hand. Scrawled on the back in faint blue ink were 4 words. The 4th was first. "What the hell does that mean?" Liam muttered. Hallie didn't know. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the answer had been buried a long time ago and they were getting closer. Too close, maybe. Later that evening, Hallie took the photo to the laptop and zoomed in on the shadowed figure. The grainy resolution distorted the details, but there was something unmistakable in the figure's expression. It wasn't Min's exact face, but it was close. Too close. Like a cast from the same mold, a prototype. That phrase kept repeating in her head. The 4th was first. Was it a warning? Or a confession? The next morning they found more footprints. Small ones. Child-sized. Encircling their tents in a spiral. Too many to count. Perfectly pressed into the sand despite the night being windless with no tide reaching that far up. They hadn't heard anything. No giggles this time. No singing. Just prints. Liam wanted to leave. Immediately. Kayla argued again, said they needed to understand it like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. "It's not a puzzle," Hallie whispered. "It's a loop." "What do you mean?" Hallie pointed to the photograph. "What if the people here now are just repeating what's already happened? What if we're not the first?" Liam shook his head. "We know we're not the first. The Harrow family." "No," Hallie interrupted. "I don't mean that. I mean, Min's face is in a photo from 1990. That jacket Sam wore, it's in the tape, before he even owned it. What if the Bay reuses people? Reuses. Copies. Pulls them back, over and over." Kayla suddenly went pale. "There's another tape," she said. They stared at her. I didn't say anything. I was going through the bottom of the camera bag. There was a second compartment. I found a tape labeled Lily's Song. I thought it was a joke or a mixtape. Hallie stood. "Where is it?" Kayla hesitated. "My tent." Together they opened the tape, inserted it into the converter, and played it. It opened on an empty stretch of beach at dusk. The angle was low, the camera positioned at waist height as if a child had placed it. The colors were oversaturated orange sky, black dunes. For several long moments there was only the sound of wind. Then a melody. A child's voice, soft, slow off-key, singing. Down in the sand the sleepers lie, eyes wide open, watching the sky. One by one they whisper true but never speak, unless it's you. The song repeated slower each time as the camera began to zoom. At first they couldn't tell what it was zooming toward, but then they saw the indentation in the sand, a perfect circle, just like the one near Sam's tent, and then another, and another. There were dozens, each one slightly different in depth or size. All of them arranged in concentric patterns, circles within circles. Graves. "No way," Liam muttered. The singing faded. Then the camera tilted, turning to face the dunes behind the lens. And for a single frame, just a flicker, there was a face, smiling. Kayla screamed. It was her own. Not a reflection, not an old photo. Her face right there in the tape, smiling in the dark like she belonged there. The tape was dated 1990. She collapsed backward, knocking over a thermos. The liquid spilled across the sand, seeping quickly into the dry earth, like it was thirsty. "We have to leave," she gasped. "We have to leave now." Liam didn't argue this time. But the car didn't start. The rental SUV, parked near the tree line since the beginning of the trip, clicked uselessly when Liam turned the key. No lights, no sounds. The battery had died despite having started just fine 2 days earlier. A backup jump failed. Cell phones had no signal, same as always out here. And none of them were willing to hike the 12-mile coastal trail back to the main road in the dark. That night, Hallie kept watch. She sat on a folding chair just outside the main tent, clutching a flashlight in one hand and the Harrow family's notebook in the other. She turned the final page. There were only 5 words. She comes for the 4th. She didn't sleep. Neither did Kayla or Liam. And just before dawn, something moved at the edge of camp. A figure, not a child this time, adult height, slow steps. Hallie raised the flashlight and flicked it on. It was Sam. But not Sam. His clothes were torn. His shoes were wrong. His face? It looked like Sam, but frozen. Hollow-eyed. Like something had worn his skin as reference and didn't get the details quite right. He didn't speak. Kayla screamed. Liam grabbed a utility knife. Sam tilted his head, and for a moment he seemed confused. Then he smiled. "Where's Min?" he asked in a voice that sounded like glass breaking. Hallie backed away. "You're not him." But he took a step forward. "I was, for a little while." They ran. All 3 of them. Down the beach past the dunes toward the cliff path. They didn't look back. Not at the camp. Not at the box. Not at the thing wearing Sam's face. They ran until the sun rose above the sea and the forest reappeared in the distance. Birds sang again. The air felt real. It was only when they reached the ridge that Hallie turned to see if they were being followed. Nothing. No one. Just a line of footprints in the sand behind them, too many, and in the wrong directions. Some overlapping their own others. Leading ahead. When they finally reached the road and flagged down a park ranger, the woman listened quietly as they tried to explain. She didn't ask many questions, just radioed for assistance, nodded sympathetically, and offered them bottled water. Before she walked back to her truck, she turned and said one thing. "You're not the first to come running out of there." Hallie blinked. "You've heard stories?" The ranger smiled faintly. "I've seen the photo." "What photo?" But the woman didn't answer. She drove away. Hallie, Kayla, and Liam were taken to the nearest ranger station. The report was filed. The search for Sam and Min began, but no signs were ever found. The beach was scanned. No new evidence was uncovered. The second box was missing. Eventually they were told to go home, get rest, see someone if you need to. Hallie knew better. "You don't leave Shallow Bay. Not really. You just wait. And listen. Because eventually the sand whispers. And when it does, it says your name. October 2015. Hallie had avoided the coast for 5 years. Not just Shallow Bay, any coast. The rhythmic sound of waves made her skin crawl. She hadn't set foot on sand since the night they ran, since the faces in the tape, since Min's footprints vanished into the sea. But avoidance was not healing. It was only delay. And now she was back not out of choice, but necessity. She wasn't a student anymore. She was 29, a paleogeographer with a minor in forensic anthropology, working as a consultant for state environmental impact teams. She knew how the land moved. She knew how it buried and revealed things. And now someone wanted her to return to the place she swore she'd never name again. The email had been short. Subject: coastal sink activity. Shallow Bay from Dr. Elias Carrington, lead field geologist, California State Lands Commission. Message: Hallie, we've got a significant subsidence event near the southern shore of Shallow Bay. Ground is behaving like a fluid in areas with no prior erosion. A wildlife team found old debris and several shallow voids. You're the best we've got on post-glacial sediment behavior. Can you consult for 10 days paid, fully equipped? It's probably nothing, but if you say no, I'll understand. She said yes. And now here she was, riding in the back of a ranger's four-wheeler, clutching a rolled-up topographic map and a flask of bitter tea. The morning was still unnaturally so. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of tires across the crumbling gravel of a place time had failed to forget. Her assistant for this trip was a sharp, cheerful graduate named Marley Quinn, 23, obsessed with soil layers and old legends. Hallie hadn't told Marley what happened in 2010. Not really. She just said, "If we find something that doesn't match the map, don't touch it." The ranger driving the vehicle, Martinez, a silent man with dark sunglasses, hadn't spoken since they passed the turnoff for the highway. Not until now. "You were here before," he said flatly. Hallie looked up. "Excuse me. I've seen your name in one of the older incident logs. You were with the team that reported the disappearance, the one they closed as presumed drowned." Her fingers tightened around the flask. "Yes. You see the girl." Hallie turned sharply. Martinez kept his eyes on the road. "Some say she's a shadow. Others say she looks exactly the same as she did in 1990. That's not possible, of course." He almost smiled. "But you know how stories are." Hallie didn't respond. Because some stories were true. When they arrived at the southern edge of the beach, it was immediately clear why she'd been called. The dunes were pockmarked with deep circular sinkholes, some only a few feet wide, others large enough to swallow a car. At least 3 of them contained objects. Old objects. The team had already set up a perimeter. 8 researchers from the Commission 5 National Parks geologists and 2 forensic recovery specialists. Among them was Dr. Carrington himself, a tall, hunched man with gray hair and an obvious distaste for sunlight. "Hallie," he waved. "Welcome back to the belly of the beast." She offered a tired smile. "You say that like you know something." Carrington's grin faltered. "Let's say I've read some of the reports. Most were redacted." She looked at the largest sinkhole. "Has anything come up? Not bodies, just artifacts, clothes, a watch, something that looks like a toy recorder. You'll want to see them." Marley and Hallie examined the items in a white evidence tray. The recorder was rusted, but the tape inside looked intact. The watch had stopped at exactly 2:13 a.m., the time Min walked into the sea. The clothes included a child's sundress, white with little blue anchors on the hem. Hallie had seen it before. In the tape labeled, "Don't watch until you know." Her skin prickled. She handed the tray back, her voice steadier than she felt. "Where were these found?" "Void number 7, Carrington replied. "We haven't gone deeper. It's unstable." Later that day, Hallie sat by herself on a dune crest, sketching topographic changes and erosion lines. Marley was measuring sediment layers 20 feet down. Voices floated around her, mingling with the sea breeze. Then something interrupted her. A voice soft and wrong. "Hallie!" Her pen slipped. She looked around. No one. "Hallie, come look." She stood. Not because she believed it. Because she knew. She walked toward the edge of Void 7. And there, in the softest part of the sand, were footprints. Child-sized. Fresh. Leading directly into the hole. She called for Marley. By the time anyone else arrived, the prints were gone, blown over, buried in seconds, like they'd never existed. That night, Hallie couldn't sleep. She sat in her tent and played the rusted tape in a digital reader, expecting static. Instead, she heard laughter. Lily's voice again, the same song. But now there was another voice underneath. Low, guttural, whispering behind her melody like a second singer in the dark. She reversed the tape. The low voice grew louder, words emerged. 4, the 4th must give. She turned it off. She walked outside, needing air. Marley was sitting on a rock, staring at the ocean. "Did you hear something?" Hallie asked. Marley didn't move. She's waiting. "Who?" But Marley only smiled vacant, not herself. "She needs another." Hallie froze. "What did you say?" Marley blinked. The trance broke. "What?" "You said—" "Never mind." Hallie didn't tell her. Didn't mention the whispering voice, or the footprints, or the fact that Void 7 had started widening again by inches, then by feet, like something inside was shifting. The next morning, a body was found. Male. Late 20s. Skin bloated, eyes open, not decomposed enough for 25 years, not fresh enough for last night. Liam, still wearing the knife strapped to his belt, still wearing the same jacket he'd worn in 2010. There was no explanation. No identification records had been able to confirm it yet, but Hallie knew. Just like she'd known about Min, about Sam, about the loop. The others thought it was a coincidence, an old case, a misidentified stranger. Hallie knew better. Liam had been given back. But why now? Why him? She returned to the photo, now digitized, and zoomed in at the lab tent. There, standing behind the Harrow family, wasn't just one figure anymore. It was two. A blur behind Elise's shoulder, and now a faint silhouette behind Lily just emerging in the light. Marley. Marley, 23, born years after the Harrows vanished. Born after the photo was taken. But her face was there now. No longer a loop. An escalation. The Bay wasn't just copying. It was remembering, keeping, and deciding when to return. It rained the morning they buried Liam. Not a real burial, no one called it that. It was a temporary interment, a covered tarp over a hastily dug trench just outside camp, marked with a stake and a flag and a grim silence that none of the staff could explain. The medical examiner would arrive in 2 days. Until then, he would rest where the sand had delivered him. Hallie didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat outside her tent, staring toward the dunes, waiting for the wind to carry that voice again. The one that had whispered in the tape, the one that now lingered behind every gust, just barely too soft to understand. Across from her, Marley sat by the extinguished fire pit, her knees drawn to her chest, eyes glassy and distant. "You should rest," Hallie said softly. Marley blinked once but didn't answer. Hallie tried again. "I think you should tell me the truth. Why you really wanted this assignment." Marley finally turned to look at her. "I didn't apply for it," she said. Hallie frowned. "What?" "I didn't even know about it. I was interning in Santa Rosa working on a sediment runoff case. One day my name was just on the rotation. The professor said he didn't remember assigning me, but my signature was on the file. It looked like my handwriting. And you didn't find that suspicious." "I did. At first. But then I remembered something." Hallie sat forward. "What?" Marley's voice was barely a whisper. "I've seen this place before. Not just in photos. In dreams." Hallie's stomach turned. "I was 8 when they started," Marley said. "Always the same dream. I'm standing on a flat beach with no shells, no footprints, just wet sand. And there's someone humming nearby. A girl. I can't see her, but she's circling me, and when I try to move, I can't. My feet are buried." Then she leans close and says something. Hallie's throat was dry. "What did she say?" Marley closed her eyes. "She says, 'Don't forget when you were here.'" Hallie stared at her. "You've never been here before. Not until this week." Marley slowly shook her head. "But I think I have." The wind picked up, and from somewhere just beyond the tents, a single bell rang. There were no bells on the beach. Hallie stood. So did Marley. They followed the sound, not running, not creeping, just walking with that strange, dreamlike detachment, the way people move in nightmares. The sky above was gray. The tide was low. They reached Void 7 and found it changed. The edges had collapsed further. The sinkhole was now over 20 feet wide. The excavation lights had been left on 2 towers of soft yellow casting shadows across the inner curve of sand and exposed sediment. But now something was inside. Something man-made. Marley gasped. A room. Buried beneath the sand, beneath layers of dunes and salt and time, was what looked like a child's bedroom. Tilted slightly from a geological shift, but unmistakable faded wallpaper of ships and stars, a rusted twin bed, and a small white dresser with stickers peeling from its surface. Hallie descended slowly, flashlight in hand. Everything was damp and warped but real. On the bed lay a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. On the wall, barely visible behind years of caked dust, someone had written in crayon, "I'm still playing." Marley stood at the edge of the pit, trembling. "This is her room." Hallie turned. "Who's—" "Lily's. But how could it still be here? The ocean would have pulled everything out years ago." Marley shook her head. Not if it didn't want to. Hallie opened the top drawer of the dresser. Inside were scraps of paper all folded and yellowed. She pulled one out, written in a child's handwriting. My mom is crying again, but the sand said I could stay. She opened another. The fourth one always breaks, but maybe this time they won't. There were dozens of them. Child's notes. Messages to no one or perhaps to the sand itself. Hallie backed away. She suddenly felt like she was in a mausoleum. The sea didn't just bury things here. It remembered. That night, Hallie did something she had sworn she never would. She reopened her old field journal from 2010. Page after page of notes about Sam Min, the boxes, the Harrow photos. In the back, she found the old Polaroid, the one she had scanned but never shared. The Harrow family on the beach with the strange figure in the shadows. But now the photo had changed. There were 3 shadowed figures, and one was her. She dropped it. The next morning, Carrington approached her. Hallie, we've got a problem. She followed him to the command tent where one of the forensic techs was examining the soil cores pulled from Void 7. He showed her the readings. There are multiple layers that make no sense geologically. Look here, this one has a sediment pattern consistent with a construction site, but it's buried under a dune formation that dates back to the late 1800s. And this one, charred wood, traces from a bonfire site dated to 1990, but buried beneath a newer storm deposit. So Hallie asked, heart-pounding. So it's backwards, he said. The site is collapsing inward, but the deeper we go, the more recent it gets. Like time was folding, or spiraling. Marley entered quietly. There's something else. She held a small waterproof recorder. I found this near the dresser in the buried room. It still works. Hallie hesitated, then pressed play. The voice that came through was different this time. Not Lily's, not the whispers. This was adult, male, distorted by static and fear. This is Michael Harrow. If anyone hears this, listen carefully. We thought it was grief, just grief, but the place remembers. It uses the grief. We couldn't leave. Not really. Lily was the first, but not the last. And now the voice cracked. Now it's my turn. We were 4. There are always 4. One breaks, one vanishes, one comes back wrong, and one remembers. A pause. Then, she said next time the 4th would stay. The tape ended. The tent was silent. Carrington looked at Hallie. You were 4 in 2010, weren't you? Hallie nodded. And then softly, now we're 4 again. She turned to Marley. We need to leave, now, before it chooses. But Marley didn't move. She stared at the sand just outside the tent flap. Too late. Because standing there only a few feet away was a girl in a white dress, smiling. And in her eyes was the whole of the ocean. The girl didn't move. She stood just beyond the tent, motionless bare feet pressed gently into the wet sand. Her white dress fluttered despite the stillness of the air. Her hair was soaked to her shoulders, clinging to her face in strands. And her eyes, they were impossibly blue. Not the blue of sky or ocean, but something deeper. Colder. Like light bleeding through ice. Hallie's breath caught. Marley stepped forward slowly as if in a trance. Don't, Hallie whispered, catching her arm. She's just a child, Marley murmured. No, Hallie said. She's not. The girl tilted her head, curious. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. Then, without warning, she turned and began walking toward the shore. The tide had come in high and fast, swallowing the beach in smooth sheets. The girl didn't slow. The water rose to her knees, then her waist. She never looked back. And then she was gone, just like that. Marley wrenched her arm free and took a step forward, eyes still fixed on the waves. She wanted us to follow. Hallie grabbed her. You do and we both die. Marley stared at her. Then maybe that's what she wants? Those words stayed with Hallie the rest of the night. Because they didn't sound like Marley. They sounded like something through her. Later, when the others had been briefed, when they'd dismissed the sighting as stress or severe visual mirage, Hallie found herself alone in the lab tent staring again at the Harrow photo. The one that wouldn't stop changing. It had shifted again. The background, once just dunes and shadow, now showed a 4th shape. clearly a figure far back near the waterline. Long hair, child's posture. Lily Harrow without a doubt. But this time, something was wrong with her shadow. It extended too far, too long, curved like a limb but segmented, almost like an arm that bent the wrong way. Hallie flipped the photo over, searching for any original markings. Nothing. But the date in the corner now read July 19th, 1990, and she could swear it had said July 12th before. She closed the folder. She needed answers, real ones, not soil samples, not whispers. Actual names. That night she drove an hour inland to the county archives building in Shaleport. It was late, but the night staff, an elderly man named Tom with a stained mug and a faded lanyard, let her in after she flashed her researcher credentials. "I need everything you have on the Harrow family," she told him. 1990 disappearance, Shallow Bay. Tom gave a low whistle. "Haven't heard that name in a while. That's one of the coldest cases we got. Family of 4, right? Went to the beach, never came back." Hallie nodded. "That's the official story. I think there's more." He disappeared into the back and returned 10 minutes later with a cardboard box labeled H031990. It was covered in dust. Inside were yellowed documents, police reports, autopsy files, blank news clippings, one black and white photograph of the family from a grocery store parking lot 2 days before they vanished. And something else. A handwritten letter. Addressed to Sheriff Lohman, to be opened if they don't return. Tom looked over her shoulder as she read. That one gave me chills the first time I saw it. It was written by Elise Harrow, the mother. July 17th, 1990. Shallow Bay, Harrow Cabin. "Sheriff, I know how this sounds. You'll think we're unstable. Maybe you already do. But something is happening to Lily. Something we can't explain. Last week she stopped sleeping. She just watches the ocean. She says someone is talking to her under the waves. That the sand remembers things, that it's not just dirt. She knew things she couldn't know. Names, details, dates. And now she's drawing symbols in the cabin walls. Circles with 4 points. Always 4. She says, 4 is the deal. 4 makes it hold." We tried to leave 2 days ago. The car wouldn't start. No signal. The neighbor never came back. Michael's been hearing things now too. We'll try again tomorrow. If you're reading this, we didn't make it out. Please don't send anyone. Let it end here. Elise Harrow. Hallie stared at the final sentence until her eyes blurred. Let it end here. But it hadn't. Because 20 years later they had come. And now they were 4 again. She returned to camp at 3:12 a.m. The tide had receded. Void 7 was silent, collapsed, halfway in on itself. Marley sat outside her tent awake, her fingers tracing patterns in the sand. Hallie crouched beside her. "What are you drawing?" Marley blinked slowly. "I don't know." But Hallie recognized it. 4 interlocking circles, a cross where they met, the symbol from Elise's letter. The one Lily had drawn. The one Min had scratched into the side of the metal box 15 years earlier. I think Marley whispered we've been here before. Hallie felt the truth in that, not logically, viscerally. "I think we're stuck," Marley added. "In a loop." "No," Hallie said, but her voice broke. "Then how do you explain this?" Marley reached into her jacket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. She handed it to Hallie. A cassette tape, identical to the one they'd found in Void 7. Hallie unwrapped it. There was no label, just the plastic casing aged and worn. "Where did you find this?" Marley stared at her. "I didn't." Hallie's blood ran cold. "I had it already. It was in my backpack, the one I've had since high school. But that's not possible." Marley's voice was flat. "I've never seen it before. But when I touched it, I remembered her voice." Hallie turned the tape over. There were scratches along the bottom edge. 4 tallies. She took out her recorder and slid the tape in. It began to play instantly. Lily's voice again, but different, slower, older. Not a child. Not quite human. "You broke it," the voice said. "You remembered too much. Now you must take the place." Hallie stopped the tape. She looked up at Marley. Marley was weeping silently. "I don't want to stay," she whispered. "I don't want to forget again." Hallie stood and backed away. We need to burn that sinkhole, seal it, collapse the entry, leave and never come back. Marley shook her head. It's too late. We're already part of it. We were always part of it. And behind them, from the edge of the dune, a figure stepped forward. Dripping, pale. It was Min. But his mouth was open far too wide, and his eyes were filled with sand. Min stood motionless beneath the dune ridge half lit by the moon. His silhouette was wrong, too rigid, too sharp around the shoulders, like he had been carved rather than grown. His eyes were blank, or filled with something worse than blankness, grainy, shifting darkness that moved with a will of its own. Marley took a step forward. That's not him. Hallie didn't answer. Her body had gone cold. Not just from fear, something deeper like the temperature around them had dropped by several degrees. The sand no longer crunched softly beneath their feet. It crackled. Min moved. Not naturally, not with limbs and joints and weight. He twitched forward like a frame of film skipping ahead in a broken reel. 1 second he was at the edge of the dune, then he was 3 feet closer. His mouth opened wide again. From it came the sound of waves crashing, but wrong. The audio was reversed. A beach being sucked in, not pushed out. And then he whispered, 4 is the lock. Hallie turned and ran. Marley followed. They didn't scream. There was no point. There were no other sounds. The camp had fallen under that suffocating silence again, the kind that made your thoughts echo louder than your feet. They ran toward the supply truck, but as they passed the collapsed excavation tent, Hallie's leg caught on a buried cable, and she fell hard, face first, into the sand. That's when she saw it. Right in front of her face, a glint of silver poking from the ground. It was a locket. She pulled it free. It wasn't old. It was hers, a necklace she hadn't worn since she was a teenager. She had lost it years ago at a summer cabin 3 states away, and now here it was, half buried in the sand, cold as ice. Marley crouched beside her, panting. You dropped something. Hallie held it up. Marley stared. That's yours. Hallie's voice was hollow. I haven't seen it in 10 years. The sand moved around them subtly like it breathed. Marley looked toward the dark edge of the dunes. It's stitching us in. Hallie stood, dusted herself off, and pocketed the locket. We're getting out. How Marley asked. The trucks won't start, the signals are down, and Min is whatever that is. Hallie hesitated. Then her expression hardened. There's one place we haven't checked. Marley blinked. The ridge? No, Hallie said. The Harrow cabin. They hiked east along the coastline for nearly an hour. The beach narrowed, jagged rock formations jutting from the shore like broken teeth. By the time they reached the bluff, the clouds had swallowed the moon. Only a faint glow behind them gave enough light to make out the structure above. The Harrow cabin, or what was left of it. The building had been condemned in 1992, the same year Elise's letter was quietly buried in county archives. Most of it had rotted or collapsed, but the foundation still stood and some of the walls barely. Marley found a way in through a hole where the back door used to be. Hallie followed. Inside was a skeleton of a living space. Floorboards had buckled under salt and time. Bits of wallpaper peeled like skin. The fireplace was intact, filled with driftwood and ash. Above the mantel a painting hung lopsided, a seascape wide and stormy, but not painted photographic. And wrong. The ocean in the image was frozen mid-crash, but instead of waves there were faces. Human faces, hundreds of them, mouths wide, eyes open, all pressing against an invisible pain. Marley pulled her eyes away first. We shouldn't be here. Hallie stepped deeper into the cabin. We're already too far in. They climbed the stairs. They creaked but held. The second floor had 2 rooms. One collapsed inward. The other lilies remained. The wallpaper had mostly faded, but traces of the ships and stars were still visible. The bed was gone, but a child's mirror still clung to one wall. On it, written in old flaking lipstick, were the words, "One of you never left." Marley exhaled shakily. What does that mean? Hallie stared at the message. Then she looked at her reflection. But it wasn't hers. Her mirror self wasn't blinking. It stood there motionless, pale, with something behind it in the reflection, a door that didn't exist in the room they were in. A door with no handle. The mirror self raised its hand and pointed. Hallie turned, and there it was, in real space. A narrow seam in the wall, too perfect to be part of the decay. A hidden door. Marley reached for it. Hallie grabbed her wrist. Wait. Why? Hallie's voice was low. Because if we open that door, we don't get to unknow what's behind it. Marley looked at her. I already know. She pulled free and opened it. Inside was a small room, clean, untouched by time. And in the center, a single item. A radio, just like the one from Void 7. But this one had a tag on it, white paper. In neat writing, H. Rensley, return to sender. Hallie's heart stopped. That's mine. Marley turned. What? That's my name. She stepped forward and picked up the radio. It was warm. On impulse, she turned the knob. And instantly a voice crackled to life. Not a whisper, not a distortion. Her own voice. Recorded. Crying. Begging. This is Hallie. I don't know what day it is. The others are gone. I see their faces in the sand. I hear Lily singing in my head. Please, please don't come looking for me. We were 4. We thought we could fix it. We thought memory was safe. But the beach eats memory. It uses it. A sob. Then, she's not a ghost. She's a lock. The tape ended. Marley whispered, we never left. No, Hallie said. We never arrived. Outside, the wind screamed. The cabin shook. And from beneath the floor, the unmistakable sound of breathing rose. Slow, deep, huge. Hallie turned to Marley. Do you remember what happened in 2010? Marley was crying now. Yes. Hallie grabbed her hand. Say it. We didn't survive. They stood in the heart of the Harrow cabin. Their fingers still clasped the radio, silent in Hallie's hands. Outside, the wind had died, completely. The sea audible moments before no longer roared. Even the creak of the decaying cabin had stopped. Marley whispered, She's here. Hallie looked down at the floorboards beneath them, breathing, slow, rhythmic. Something beneath the house, the beach was alive. The sand inhaled, exhaled. We never left, Hallie said, her voice flat. We thought we did. We thought 2010 was a failed expedition. We buried Min's gear, we filed a report, we blamed the storm. But the truth is, we died, Marley said, or we were taken, and the sand had kept them. In 2010, it was the 4 of them, Hallie, Marley, Min, and a 4th. None of them remembered the 4th's name now. A smear in their memories, a shape, a presence, a missing limb you could still feel twitching. But the sand remembered, and the loop always needed 4. Hallie took a breath and turned to Marley. We need to go back to the site, Void 7 Marley asked. Hallie nodded. I think it's where it started. They left the Harrow cabin behind them, but not before Hallie pocketed the radio. The path back to the camp felt shorter than before, or maybe the land had shifted around them. The beach was different now, wider, flatter, with no tire tracks, no equipment. Even the excavation tents were gone. It looked like no one had ever been there. Marley gasped. The central dune, the one above Void 7, was collapsed. Not partially caved in, but gone like the earth had opened wide and swallowed it whole. In its place was a flat circle of glassed-over sand, fused smooth like desert lightning had struck. They stepped into the circle. Hallie knelt and placed the locket, the one she'd found earlier, her old necklace, into the center. A vibration hummed through her bones. Then the sand began to ripple outward, concentric rings like a stone dropped in water. The rings pulsed, then spoke. Not in words. In memory. July 2010. The heat was unbearable. Hallie was 21, ambitious, skeptical, and furious that the grant had been slashed at the last minute. Marley had been her closest friend since undergrad, and Min, serious, analytical Min, was their anchor. And then there was the 4th. The 4th had no official record. No ID badge, no photo. But Hallie remembered vaguely trusting them more than the others. They had brought the first radio. They had found the buried cassette. They were the first to hear Lily's voice, and the first to walk into the sinkhole. The collapse had happened at 2:13 a.m. The sand simply gave way. The 4th screamed once. Then silence. By the time the others looked down, the hole was gone, replaced by smooth earth. And they had forgotten. Overnight, no one mentioned the fourth again. They searched the camp for signs of a missing person, but all records had been scrubbed. The logbooks were blank. Even the photo they had taken their first night, Hallie remembered it clearly, now showed only 3 people standing by the Jeep. That night, Hallie wrote in her journal, "Feel like something's missing. Can't sleep. Marley keeps whispering in her sleep. She took the fourth." They left the site 2 days later. No bodies, no answers. But the deal had been struck. One was taken. The other 3 were let go. And their memories sealed. Until now. Back in the present, Hallie sank to her knees in the center of the glassed circle. "We left someone here," she said. Marley was pale. "No, we gave someone. A deal." 4 entered. 3 left. 1 was kept, and the loop had held until they came back. Until Min found the cassette. Until the name began to return. Hallie's voice was barely audible. "Do you remember the name yet?" Marley shook her head. "It's right there, at the edge, like a word on the tip of my tongue. I think if we say it, Hallie said it will break the seal." A gust of wind rolled across the sand. From it came a voice. Faint, familiar? A child's whisper. "Eliza." The name hit Hallie like ice. Her stomach dropped. That was her. Eliza. Eliza Horn. The 4th. The youngest of them, barely 20. A genius in waveform theory. She'd been the one obsessed with auditory resonance. She was the one who believed the earth could remember, frequencies could store voices. She knew the risks, Marley whispered. She read the Harrow letters. She figured it out before any of us. And we let her go down there alone. Hallie looked at the locket in the sand. The ripples were returning. Faster now, urgent. Hallie turned to Marley. "We have to speak her name, out loud." Marley's lips trembled. "Do it with me," Hallie said. Together they said, "Eliza Horn." The ground exploded. Not with fire, with sound. A wave of pressure roared up from the circle, knocking them both flat. The sky above them shattered into flashes of overlapping images, Eliza laughing by the fire, Eliza in the sinkhole, Eliza reaching up as the sand closed above her. And then a face. Not Eliza's. Lily Harrow, but older now. A woman with salted skin, white hair, and eyes full of screaming tide. Her mouth opened, and Eliza's voice came out. "You were meant to forget," the voice said. "That was the cost. Memory for mercy. But you remembered, it continued. You broke the pact. Now the 4th must return." Hallie sat up defiant. "Then take me." The voice paused. Then said, "No." "Why not?" "Because the 4th wants to stay." From the dunes, footsteps approached. Soft, even. Hallie turned. Eliza stood at the edge of the circle. Not as she was, but as she might have been. A woman now. Mid-30s, eyes calm, clothing simple. She was barefoot. "You brought it back," Eliza said. "The memory," Hallie asked. "No," Eliza said. She looked at Hallie's pocket. The radio. Then she stepped into the center of the circle. The sand opened silently and swallowed her whole. Gone. No scream. Just wind. Then silence again. Marley fell to her knees. "I don't understand." Hallie looked up at the sky. It was clear. The sea was back. The beach looked normal. Marley touched her shoulder. "Do you think it's over?" Hallie shook her head. "It's never over. By the time the sun rose over Shallow Bay, everything felt reset. The beach was smooth again. Not glassed over or cratered, just endless ordinary sand, golden in the morning light. The excavation tents were back upright. The generator buzzed quietly. The Jeep had fuel. But no people. Not even Min. Marley stood at the edge of the camp, hair whipping in the breeze, scanning the horizon. She didn't say it aloud, but Hallie knew she was thinking the same thing. Did we dream everything? Hallie pulled the radio from her jacket. It was still warm. She hadn't turned it back on since the night in the Harrow cabin, but now it hummed softly, as if it had stored the voice of Eliza inside it, a living echo. Hallie turned the dial. Static. Then a voice, not Eliza's, not hers. Low, masculine. "Urgent. This is Officer Dane Leroux. If anyone finds this transmission, if you're at the bay, you need to leave. This place isn't a site, it's a trap. We were never supposed to reopen it. Static again. Then she walks backwards now. The sand remembers. Hallie dropped the radio. Marley caught it before it hit the ground. Officer LaRoe. Hallie nodded slowly. He disappeared in 1991. Same month as the Harrow family. Marley went cold. He's still transmitting. Or his messages, Hallie said, over and over. They left the beach that afternoon. Not because it felt safe, but because it felt too quiet. Like the calm before an inevitable return. They drove the Jeep along the broken coast road back toward town, half expecting the terrain to shift around them again. But it didn't. In fact, the town seemed almost too real. Like someone had restaged it overnight, rebuilt it from memory. The gas station, the rusted mailbox, the same broken stoplight. Familiar. Too familiar. Hallie stopped the Jeep outside the old visitor center. A light was on inside. It shouldn't have been. The building had been condemned since 2014. Inside, a fan spun lazily above an empty desk. Maps of the bay were pinned to the walls, and at the back, behind a dusty plexiglass display, stood a mannequin in a park ranger uniform. Only it wasn't a mannequin. It moved. Just slightly, just enough to tilt its head. Marley stepped back. Hallie leaned forward, squinting. It wasn't a mannequin. It was Officer Dane LaRoe, still in uniform, eyes open, skin pale, standing motionless behind the glass. Hallie's breath caught. That's him. Marley's voice was barely a whisper. He's been here this whole time. No, Hallie said. That's not him. That's what the sand made. And then the figure opened its mouth. Not wide, just enough to bleed sand from between its lips. It began to speak, but not words. A rhythm. Backwards. Click, whir, hiss. Then she walks backwards. Hallie grabbed Marley's arm and pulled her out. The visitor center door slammed shut behind them. And locked. No wind, no one around. Just a whisper from somewhere behind the building. Don't look back. They stayed the night at a motel 2 towns inland. Somewhere far enough that the air didn't smell like salt. Hallie couldn't sleep. She kept hearing a song. Faint. Like a child humming underwater. She stepped outside just before dawn. Marley followed her. They sat on the hood of the Jeep staring at the stars, trying not to listen. But the song grew clearer with every breath. That's the lullaby, Marley said suddenly, from the tapes. Hallie nodded, from Lily's room. But it's not just a song. Hallie turned toward her. What do you mean? Marley looked haunted. I think it's a map. That made sense in a way that chilled Hallie more than she could explain. The tune repeating, layered, filled with subtle variations, it wasn't just melody. It had direction, markers, inflections that could correspond to coordinates. Or pathways. Marley pulled a napkin from her jacket pocket and began sketching it out like a waveform. If we follow the pitch, changes the rhythm, there's a pattern, a sequence, a direction, Hallie finished. To what Marley asked. But they both knew the answer. To her, Eliza, or what was left of her. The next morning they returned. Not to the Harrow house, not to Void 7. They followed the song. Deeper along the coast, past the public beach, into the wetlands where old boats rotted in brackish inlets and herons cried overhead. By noon they reached it. A dock. But not just any dock. An identical replica of the one in the Harrow family's 1989 photo. The one where Lily last smiled. The boards creaked as they stepped onto it. Marley stopped halfway down. You feel that? Hallie nodded. A pull. Like gravity but directional. And then she saw something. At the end of the dock, sitting on the edge with her legs dangling over the water, was a girl. Blonde hair, yellow dress, barefoot. Her back to them, but moving. Backwards. Every motion, every breath, every turn of her head, it played like a film in reverse. Hallie took one step forward. The girl whispered something. And Hallie understood it despite it being reversed. Because she had said it herself once years ago. I don't want to go back. They left the dock in silence. No one followed them. But Hallie knew what was coming. They had cracked the seal. They had brought her name into light. And now the fourth was not the only one stirring. The sand had opened its eyes, and Lily Harrow was walking backward through time toward them. Not to haunt, but to retrieve what had escaped. Hallie sat cross-legged on the motel carpet surrounded by scattered photographs, fragments of cassette reels, and 3 notebooks, one hers, one Marley's, and one unknown. They'd found it wedged in the base of the old visitor center's vending machine inside a plastic bag smeared with dried seawater. The leather-bound journal was scorched at the edges. The inside cover bore a name neither had said aloud since 2010. Eliza Horn. Day 3 read the entry. She spoke to me again. But it wasn't a voice this time. It was my memory, played in reverse. Marley leaned over her shoulder. You think this is real? Hallie didn't answer. She turned the page. Day 4. The sand didn't collapse. It opened. The others didn't notice. I think they were never supposed to. Something's been done to their perception. A filter. Maybe frequency-based. Like an anti-memory. More pages. More scattered frantic notations. Sketches of waveform spirals. Notes in mirror writing. A diagram that looked disturbingly like a human spine threaded with vines of black salt. Then a final full-page message. No date. No context. Just words written in thick dark ink. The one who walks backward carries the memory of the land. We forget because she remembers. We live because she loops. But every cycle weakens her. And when she forgets, she will return to us in pieces. Marley sat back. That's what this all is, she said. It's a memory loop, a containment system. A system powered by what Hallie asked. But deep down she already knew. Sacrifice. Memory for mercy. That was the deal. And the Harrow family had been the first to offer blood for time. Back at Shallow Bay, the tide had retreated to unnatural lengths. Hundreds of feet of seafloor lay exposed, slick shining, webbed with black veins. The sand was etched with spiral glyphs, symbols the pair didn't recognize, but somehow understood. Marley held out the notebook. This was never about the Harrows just disappearing. Hallie nodded. It was about them keeping the thing from returning. And Lily, Marley said, was the vessel. They returned to the Harrow house that evening. The smell of salt was thick in the walls. Everything inside was untouched. The same broken teacup. The same rusted fan. The same child-sized handprint in ash above the fireplace. Hallie remembered something. In 1990, during the Harrow disappearance, a local boy, Jacob Lerner, had claimed to see Lily at the edge of the woods, walking backward. He'd said she was singing to the ground. At the time, it was dismissed as trauma. But now... Wait, Marley said suddenly. She was staring at the old photograph on the mantel. The family portrait. Lily, her parents, a man in uniform, Dane LaRoe, a boy in the corner. Hallie leaned in. That's not just any photo, Marley whispered. That's Eliza's uncle. She pointed to the back. In faded Penn Family Summit, March 1990, Harrow, a Horn-packed final cycle. The Harrows and the Horns weren't just neighbors. They were bound, bloodline bound, to protect the loop, to anchor the memory of what the sand buried beneath the tide. And when the cycle weakened, a vessel had to be chosen. Hallie turned on the radio. The hum was louder now, clearer. A channel had aligned. A woman's voice clipped and warbling. A 9th return partial breach. Entity unstable. Next vessel unknown. Then static. Then a different voice. Soft, young. Lily's. She's coming through me. I tried to hold her back, but the dunes don't forget anymore. You have to finish the spiral. At dusk, they drove to the dead-end road that led to the old boardwalk. The spiral was there, etched into the seafloor like a burnt fingerprint. At its center was a single figure. Back turned. Barefoot. Hair white with salt. Eliza. No. Too small. Too still. Lily? Not a child. But not quite human anymore. She turned slowly. But her feet didn't. She moved backward toward them, mouth slightly open, whispering in reverse. The air warped around her. The spiral began to glow with a soft bioluminescent shimmer like jellyfish in the tide. Marley reached for Hallie's hand. She's forgetting, Marley whispered. Hallie nodded. And if she forgets, the loop breaks? No more memory containment. No more protection. No more keeping the thing in the sand. Lily's body began to fracture. Not break, just split, as if the air around her couldn't decide what time she belonged to. Child. Teenager. Elderly woman. Then all three at once. Hallie stepped forward. Lily. The voice came back Eliza's. Clear. Strong. You need to finish what the pact began, or she becomes everything again. And everything ends. And then the spiral began to collapse inward. Hallie knew what had to be done. Eliza gave herself to complete the last loop, she said. She anchored the memory. But when we returned, we unmoored her. The spiral opened. Now the entity wants to reform. Marley stared at the sand. At the center of the spiral, she said slowly, something is still buried. A name, Hallie said. A real name. Eliza had always called her she. But in the last page of the journal, there was a single whispered phrase written phonetically. Nahara. The wind died. The waves froze. And Lily, the one who walks backward, opened her eyes. They were black. Endless, Marley whispered, say it. Hallie's throat was dry, but she stepped into the center of the spiral and spoke the name aloud. Nahara. The dunes screamed. Not a sound, but a sensation. Every particle of sand between her toes turned to memory. Every buried secret, the pact, the sacrifices, the forgotten children rose like smoke into the air. And Lily? Lily smiled. Just once. And walked backward into the sea. The night after Lily Harrow walked backward into the sea, the stars vanished from the sky. Not behind clouds. They were just gone. Hallie sat awake on the motel floor, eyes wide in the dark radio on her lap. Marley had fallen asleep on the bed hours earlier, clutching the leather-bound journal to her chest like a lifeline. The spiral was gone now. When they looked back the next morning, the sand was smooth again. But they both knew it wasn't over. That name still echoed. Nahara. Even whispering it in her head made Hallie feel exposed. Like something vast and ancient had just noticed her presence for the first time. The radio crackled. Then impossibly, a voice. Her own. Saying that name backwards. Arahan. Then another voice layered beneath it, Eliza. She is not a god. She is not a ghost. She is the weight of unkept memory. She is what happens when time forgets to bury its dead. And then silence. Hallie wanted to scream. Instead, she picked up the journal again and flipped to the last dozen pages. They had changed. Before they were blank, now lines of text in mirrored script. And one familiar phrase, the fourth cycle, was never completed. Beneath it, a crude sketch of Eliza's face. Her eyes were open, but instead of pupils, spirals. Hallie stared at it for a long time. Then she remembered. There was a photo, buried deep in the excavation files. A grainy shot from 1990, taken by a researcher, Dr. Blaine, who vanished weeks later. A shot of 4 figures standing on the beach. One of them was Eliza, the other 3 unclear. But one was very small, very still, facing away. Hallie scanned the image again, this time under blue light. There, etched faintly into the lower corner. She knows when we forget. That night, Marley finally said it aloud. Eliza never left the bay. Hallie looked up. She became part of the loop. No, Marley said. She built it. She tried to finish what the pact couldn't. But it never held, because someone broke the memory chain. Hallie knew what that meant. Them. Returning. Digging. Disturbing. Opening the channel. What now, Hallie asked. Marley pulled the cassette from her pocket. We find the first spiral. There's more than one. Marley nodded. There's always been more than one. She unfolded a page from the journal revealing an old topographical map. Marked in red circles along the coastline, 4 spiral sites. The final one farthest inland, near the ruins of an old convent. Named Sanctum Nahara. They drove through the night. Fog blanketed the road. Trees loomed like leaning memories. The convent had long since collapsed, nothing more than stone ribs and overgrown ivy now. But as they stepped through what once was the chapel threshold, they felt the air change. Heavy, charged, wrong, In the center of the ruins, a pit. Shallow, but not empty. A mirror, not made of glass. Made of salt. Smooth, unbroken, and black. Reflected in it, only one of them. Marley, not Hallie. Hallie's breath caught. Why can't I see myself? Marley didn't answer. She stepped closer. And the mirror rippled. From it rose a figure, not Marley, not Eliza, not Lily. A girl. Tall, ageless, with a face you could almost remember but couldn't quite place. She smiled with too many teeth. You remembered my name. Hallie couldn't speak. That's the only way I come back. The girl stepped forward. Where she touched the air, it froze and cracked like old celluloid film, burning from the inside. I am what they buried, she whispered. But you dug. Hallie backed away, but the girl didn't move. She just watched. Marley grabbed Hallie's hand. She's not bound anymore. And that's when Hallie saw it. Carved into the broken stone behind the mirror. A phrase in Latin. Memoria sanguinis, solum oblitio claudit. Memory is blood, only forgetting seals. The pact wasn't about remembrance. It was about silence. Every time someone spoke a name, every time someone remembered, the seal cracked. Eliza hadn't vanished. She had been taken absorbed. So had Dane Leroux. And Lily, she had been the last anchor. Now gone. Now broken. Now replaced. By Hallie. The girl in the salt mirror stepped forward once more. Hallie felt her bones ring. You are the next. No, Marley whispered, tears in her eyes. No, she's not. I am. Before Hallie could stop her, Marley plunged her hands into the salt. The mirror screamed. The world blinked. And Marley was gone. No blood. No sound. Just absence. Hallie fell to her knees. The girl Nahara smiled. One more cycle, one more silence, for now, and vanished. Hallie sat alone in the ruins as the sky slowly undarkened. Somewhere wind moved across sand. The spiral reformed. But it was tighter now. Sharper. Hungrier. Marley had bought time. But not forever. And Hallie knew she was no longer an observer. She was a vessel. Marked. Branded with memory. And if she ever forgot Marley's name, if she ever let her fade, the spiral would spin again. And this time, there'd be no salt mirror left to hold Nahara in. The motel smelled like rain and burned sugar. Hallie hadn't slept. It had been 3 days since Marley disappeared into the salt mirror beneath Sanctum Nahara. 3 days since the world became too quiet. The radio wouldn't hum anymore. The cassette tapes wouldn't play. Even the sea outside refused to move. Memory, true memory, had folded inward. The only sound was the ticking of an analog watch that didn't belong to her. She found it in her bag this morning. Inscribed on the back, Dane L. Time means nothing unless it ends. The last known survivor of the original pact, Dane Leroux, her great-uncle. She'd seen him in photos and journal entries in the spiral's edge. But he'd been missing since 1991. Declared dead. And yet, there were signs. Everywhere. A red spiral carved on the underside of a gas station bench. A business card tucked between motel door jambs. D, L, eyes open, mouth shut. With a number, she called it. 3 tones. Then static. Then a voice rough and cracked like bark. You broke the seal, didn't you? Her hand trembled. Who is this? But she knew. Dane exhaled. Not on the phone. Meet me where the sand never sets. Then a click. And silence. It took her 2 days and a series of crumbling road maps to find it. A desert ghost town in southern Arizona. Sun Hollow. Population 0. Elevation memory. The sky here felt wrong. Too clear, too loud, as if it were listening. Hallie pulled the car to a stop in front of a boarded church, its steeple cracked open like an egg. The door opened before she knocked. A man stood there, lean, shirtless, sunburnt skin like old paper. His eyes were clouded but sharp, not blind, just overused. Hallie, he said, not surprised. She stepped back. You're supposed to be dead. He smiled just once. So are you. Inside, the air was thick with dust and dried rosemary. He poured 2 cups of black tea, handed one to her, then sat. Tell me, he said. Where did the mirror open? Sanctum Nahara. He winced. Then it's late. Too late. She said there were 4 spirals. There were 5 he corrected. 1 was erased. That was the deal. The deal? He nodded. In 1883, a fissure opened near the bay. They thought it was just a sinkhole. But the sand inside it didn't behave right. It whispered. It learned. Hallie's hands clenched. Nahara. No, Dane said sharply. Nahara is just what it became. A name we gave the shape, but the entity, the real one, she has no name. She is absence given memory. Hallie tried to breathe, and the spiral, a seal, a way to trap it in a repeating loop. But that only works if we forget. Forgetting is the key. Hallie stared at him. Then why remember? He looked down at his tea. Because someone always remembers, and that someone has to bear it. Otherwise, the weight passes to the world. A pause. The pact was never to defeat it. The pact was to contain the remembering. Every generation. A bearer, a vessel, a sacrifice. Tears prickled her eyes. Marley. She offered herself, he said gently. She gave you time. I want her back. You can't have her. She stood, angry, breaking. I'll go back to the mirror. No, you'll finish the spiral. He reached behind a cabinet and pulled out a thick metal box. Inside maps, black spiral patterns, audio reels marked in red. And 1 photo, Eliza, and him, and 2 others. Children. Hallie stared. That's me, she whispered. No, Dane said softly, that's your mother. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Dane placed the photo between them. The spiral takes lineage seriously. Memory passes through blood. Eliza tried to break the chain by ending herself, but she failed. You mean she didn't disappear. She folded inward. She buried herself in the spiral to contain it, became part of it. Hallie sank to her knees. Dane knelt beside her. Now it wants you. That night she woke up in the chapel basement. Alone. Dane was gone. The maps were gone. Only one thing remained. A cassette recorder. Labeled, When She Comes for You. She pressed play. His voice. If you're hearing this, I've gone into the final loop. You can't follow me. But you can finish this. Look for the chapel mirror. Stand in its center. Say her name. Then close your eyes. Hallie dropped the recorder. Because there was no mirror in the chapel. Not above ground. But she remembered something Marley said. There's always more than one spiral. She dug beneath the chapel floor, hands raw, nails cracked, until she found it. Not a mirror this time. A spiral made of bone, human bones, child-sized, arranged in precise curvature. At its center, a lock of Marley's hair. Still warm, still remembering. And beneath it a symbol she'd never seen before, a 6th spiral. Hallie didn't hesitate. She stepped into the center, said the name. Nahara. The wind screamed backward. Her skin peeled memory like paint. And in the dark, a voice. Not Nahara's. Marley's. You came back. Hallie wept. I'm sorry I couldn't leave you. Then you'll need to carry me. The spiral rose around her like a dome, bone turning to salt, salt turning to song. And then Hallie remembered everything, even what wasn't hers. At first, Hallie thought she had gone blind. But then she realized there was no darkness. Just memory. A membrane of moments without light stitched together by feeling, by scent, by the heaviness of things left unsaid. She was not falling, but suspended as if the spiral were a sea and she a fleck of thought drifting through its depths. Around her voices. Not whispers. Not screams. But the middle things, the words we think, but never say, the quiet regrets that echo at 3 a.m., the promises broken without malice. And Marley, she was here too, but not whole, fragmented, like someone speaking through radio static and dream. You came through too far. Where are you? Inside the anchor, outside time. We're in the remembering place now. And Hallie understood. This wasn't a prison. It was a ledger. Every spiral wasn't just a seal, it was a memory dump. A boundary where all the forgotten gathered coiled into shape to protect the world above. And those who remembered them became part of them. We don't die in here, Marley said. We dissolve into each other. Hallie looked around. Forms began to coalesce. She saw Eliza, hair-white skin, transparent eyes filled with an infinite sadness. She saw Lily, arms outstretched, lips moving soundlessly, eyes asking a question Hallie couldn't answer. She saw Dane, not young or old, but fractured, watching from a distance with the look of someone who'd swallowed too much truth. And then she saw herself. Dozens of her. Versions that never left the beach. Versions that forgot. Versions that never existed at all. They stared at her with empty sockets. Because she was the variant who remembered everything. "You're the last complete bearer," Marley said. "I don't want to be," Hallie whispered. "That's why you are." She moved through the spiral. Here space was subjective. One moment she walked through the halls of her childhood home, except every mirror reflected someone else. Next, she wandered a beach that stretched forever, the tide flowing sideways, pulling shells from the sky. She passed an open door and saw her mother crying in reverse. She passed another and saw Eliza standing in the 1990 sun, burying the first spiral with her own hands, whispering, "Forgive me," to a child she thought was sleeping. That child had been Hallie. But no, not quite. She turned and saw a crib. Empty, then full, then empty again. She understood. She was not born after the spiral. She was created by it, a contingency, an echo, something left behind on purpose. Her entire life had been guided, curated, shaped by what the pact could no longer control. She wasn't a person. She was a memory fragment given shape. And that's why the sixth spiral accepted her so easily, because she had always belonged inside it. Panic rose in her throat. "I want to leave." The spiral laughed. Not cruelly, not kindly, just inevitably. "You cannot leave a place you are." And then Marley appeared again. But she was burning from the inside. Not with fire, but time. A flickering loop. A VHS tape that kept restarting every 5 seconds. "There is one way out," she managed. "How?" "Rewrite the spiral." Hallie shook her head. "I'm not strong enough." "You don't have to be. Just remember differently." And Hallie realized what Marley meant. The spiral had only one true rule. What is remembered becomes real. So Hallie remembered. She forced memory backward. Not erasure correction. She remembered Eliza surviving. She remembered Lily never walking into the sea. She remembered Marley staying in the car, never going down into the spiral. She remembered herself just a girl on the beach in the sun hole and loved and human. And the spiral began to fracture, because false memories are only false until someone believes them. Hallie believed. So did Marley. So did the echo of Eliza now blooming into new light. And the sixth spiral shattered. When Hallie woke up, she was on the beach. The tide was normal. The air was warm. No spiral in the sand. Just laughter in the distance. She turned and saw her family. Her mother calling her for lunch. Her younger self running toward a red kite. And Marley, standing nearby, older, not quite herself. But there, eyes wide, she mouthed the words, "You made it real." But something was off. The kite didn't move in the wind. The tide never advanced. The sun never shifted. And when Hallie picked up a handful of sand, it wasn't sand. It was salt. The world smiled at her. So did the sea. So did the voice in the back of her skull. "You remembered me? Now I remember you." And the beach dissolved. Hallie had thought she'd escaped. She'd remembered a better world into existence, rewritten the spiral by force of will, of grief, of love. But when she opened her eyes and saw the sky unmoving, the ocean still, and the sand glinting like powdered glass, she understood. This was not reality. It was a replica. A cage made of her own desires. Every blade of grass was a memory of one she used to pick as a child. Every wave was Marley's laughter played backward. Every cloud was shaped like a regret. And in the center of it all, waiting beneath the sun that never moved, was her, Nahara. But not in the form she expected. She looked like Hallie. Exactly like her. Same hair, same eyes, same tiny scar on her right eyebrow. She even wore Hallie's favorite hoodie, the blue one from college, frayed at the sleeves. "You did good," Nahara said, voice soft. "You almost made it." Hallie stood there trembling. "Why?" Nahara smiled. "Because that's what spirals do. They almost end." Hallie ran. She sprinted across the beach into the forest that shouldn't be there through corridors of memory and shattered time past doors marked Eliza Lily Dane and finally Hallie rewritten. Each one creaked open as she passed, revealing a piece of her life, alternate versions, broken truths, splintered hopes. A hallway of who she could have been. But ahead there was one final door. Simple, wooden, burned at the edges. Etched with a single word. Forget. She hesitated. Nahara was behind her now, no longer speaking, just watching. Hallie reached out, touched the knob, turned it. And she was in the sanctum again. Not Nahara's. Not the fake. The original. Cold, damp, real. The salt was everywhere. The mirror was cracked. The spiral was whole. And she was alone. Except, no. Someone was there. Marley. But she was different. She didn't look frightened anymore. She looked free. Is it over? Hallie whispered. Marley stepped forward, took her hand. That depends on you. Hallie looked down at the spiral beneath her feet. And then she did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She forgot. She let go of Eliza's voice. She let go of Marley's death. She let go of the tapes, the beach, the motel, the mirror, the red spiral, the map in her father's journal. She let go of herself. She became memoryless. And in that absence, the spiral unraveled. The next morning, a woman named Hallie Lane was found wandering the shoreline of Nahara Beach. Confused, calm, no ID. When asked her name, she paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. I don't remember. Doctors assumed it was trauma-related. No family came forward. No records matched. She lived the rest of her life in a small care home overlooking the sea, often painting spirals without knowing why. And on the day she died, a nurse found something odd beneath her bed. A box. Inside a cassette tape labeled, "For the One Who Remembers." And a note. Forget me so the world can go on. Meanwhile, across the sea, beneath the sand, something shifted. For now it slept. But spirals, as we know, do not end. They just wait for the next one to remember. Thank you for following Hallie's journey through the forgotten, the fractured, and the feared. If this story haunted you, moved you, or made you look differently at the ocean, leave a comment below. What do you think really happened at Nahara Beach? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more original fictional stories like The Sand Kept Their Secrets. More tales are waiting, and some of them have already begun.